Dr. Stephen Lowe here with AdamRevival. I'm here with Ryan Listerman, and we have a special guest today. This is Eric Molitor, and Eric was unfortunately, I would say, a victim of the Gretchen Whitmer administration, the federal government infiltration, FBI, all that stuff. It was national news. We're very grateful to have Eric here, and we're very grateful to have a platform to be able to get his message out now. Eric is running for the sheriff's position in the 2024 general election for Wexford County, and we support him, and we want to get his message out there. So, Eric, why don't we just start from the genesis? Let's start from the beginning of this, and I'm just going to hand the mic over to you and get it going.
All right. So I got to tell everybody whenever I do an interview with them, it's not really easy to keep everything in a linear path. So if I jump around a lot and you guys get confused, please feel free to stop me. And I'll probably lose my train of thought every once in a while. That happens during this. But anyways, with that being said, so everybody remembers back in 2019 and 2020, all the Antifa and BLM rallies that turned into riots. We remember communities being burnt down, people being murdered, like the worst of the worst that civilian life could offer. We were seeing it, right? So around that time, I connected with a prepper group. It was not a militia group. It was an actual prepper group. What they did, the founder of it had Wexford County and then surrounding counties as a buffer zone, right? So that way, if anything started happening, we would get early warning. So we'd be able to prepare, faster, obviously. During this, that's when the COVID lockdowns and mandates in Michigan really got handed down. And so we tried to follow the mandates at first.
Eric, not to interrupt your train of thought, but just for listeners, a prepper group. So like, what was your kind of the main intent of this prepper group? Just so people can kind of be understanding of the term.
A prepper group, a real prepper group, is about self-sufficiency. So there's a lot of militia-like training. So there is self-defense using weapons in your body and stuff like that. Also things like land navigation and whatnot. But there's also how to grow crops, how to forage in your own area, animal husbandry, water catchment and purification. So pretty much anything that will keep the government out of your life is what this group was about. So that's a prepper group.
Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Very good.
During that, because we didn't want to get together, we held an online class, and I have a little bit of medical training, EMT basic. I didn't actually pass it, but I made it through the whole thing, the whole training. So I gave a class on IFAC, which is an individual first aid kit. And on that training, that's the first time I saw what the government calls the ringleader, Adam Fox. The guy's got a pretty recognizable face. So anyways, I gave the training, everybody bantered back and forth a little bit. Next time I saw this guy, we were down in Grand Rapids at Rosa Parks Circle. And that was for an anti-lockdown protest. We did not like these lockdowns. And I saw him in the crowd. I was like, well, holy cow, what are the chances I'd see this guy? So I went over and shook his hand and introduced myself like a normal human being would do. I went back and I stood in the security line looking over the crowd. After that, we stayed in contact a little bit here and there. Up in Cadillac, we had heard that Antifa and BLM were planning on having a rally here. It was weird how they were always running together, So anyways, we heard that they were coming up here. With another friend, I started a civil defense force. So that's more along the lines of a militia, right? And that was because we didn't want our towns to be destroyed and our people to be hurt. So anyways, we started that. We started getting pictures of like vans and whatnot that these people were supposedly being transported in the vans. We actually had pictures of the license plates as well. Well, a part of the civil defense force was a police liaison named Duff Luter. So we could actually take information to this guy and he'd run it through the police and bring it back. Either it's good or it's not good info. We also ran on bylaws with the police. So the group was there to supplement, not supersede police. They worked right in line with them. It was really cool, actually. About 300 people from the town went out and stood, to protect the town, the citizens, but also the rally goers, man, because they do have, a right to hold protests and rallies. So we wanted to make sure that the extreme right-wingers were not also going to come in and mess with those people. It was for the defense of everybody and protection of everybody. So anyways, Duff Luter, we gave him the pictures of the vans and he ran the information. He came back and said, yes, this is legit. They're getting the same information. So with that in mind, I got a hold of Adam and asked him if he had heard about this or seen these vans, anything. He said no. I was like, well, because he lived in Grand Rapids. So I was like, hey, man, if you hear anything, because they're going to have to come from up, down south to get up to me. If you hear anything, please let us know. He said, okay. So a little bit later, and this is about the extent of our interactions, you know what I mean? A little bit later, he had actually gotten me a job in private security. And during that time, there were no jobs. The jobs you could get didn't pay well. The hours were cut drastically. You had to wear masks, or you had to tell people to get out because they weren't wearing masks. Like, it was just a terrible time for everybody in Michigan. So, I was like, yeah, man, what is it? He's like, well, it's private security. I was like, what, man? Like, talk about good pay, and finally I can use some of the skills I've gained. These skills aren't useful anywhere else but in these sorts of situations.
Right.
So I was really excited, and I was super grateful to this guy for getting me the best paying job I've ever had in my life. So of course I told him yes. Not long after that, June, July, I want to say it was in June was when he asked, I want to say. Anyways, a little bit later he asked me, text me and said, do you want to go for a ride? And I'm thinking, I asked him, what do you have in mind? He said a high profile vacation house. He didn't say anything about Whitmer. Why the heck would I be thinking that with everything? So this is why I prefaced with the group and the prepper group and all that, what we had going on in Cadillac, was because of all the intel and me working alongside with the police and other groups and other counties. I'm thinking, this is more good guy stuff. So high profile vacation house.
Yeah.
What Antifa and BLM were doing was they were holding up in outlying areas from the cities they were going into and destroying in the hotels and motels. So I start putting my mind, how my mind works to this. And I'm like, is this a house that they plan on holding up at, which would be super smart, because if they're onto the fact that we're onto them, they're going to want to hold up in private residence, or is this a place they're looking at to destroy? Because I've also went to other towns, like Muskegon, for example, which is about an hour away from me, an hour and 15 minutes away from me. And I stood in the town for a friend, and yes, they actually sent scouts down the street. They tried to set one city dumpster on fire, and that wasn't a big deal. They tried to mess with the Walmart. The cops shut that down real fast. So I've delved deep into the protection aspect of everything, right? So in my head, we're doing good guy stuff. I said, yeah, I'd be down for doing that. And what's really cool is the FBI has all of our text messages back and forth. So in these, you can tell that it was never.
So Eric, at this point, when he's asking you to go to surveil this house, you're employed for, like, you're actually collecting a paycheck from him, or how is that
Not from
employment
him.
look?
So when you do private security, unless you're with a firm, you actually are an independent contractor. So Adam just hooked me up with his boss, who then became my boss. And the funny thing about these guys, the government said that I'm anti-government and anti-law enforcement. Both these guys were U.S. Marshals. Okay, they're federal law enforcement. So tell me that I hate the government and law enforcement, right? I have a different opinion now, but at that point,
Right.
I was like, all right, cool. So, I was telling you guys about the FBI actually taking screenshots of our messages back and forth. Nowhere in there did it say anything explicitly or any other manner to make you think that we're going to go do some bad guy stuff against Governor Whitmer, right? So anyways, he said that there's going to be like 5 guys coming up. And so anyways, him and the confidential human source, the CHS, Dan Chappell, he's the original guy that started all this. This Dan Chappell was in the military. He was a forward observer. And what those guys do is they go ahead of the troops into enemy territory, and they'll like laser things so that planes can come in and level them. They'll take out. Oh yeah, man. And he had video to prove it. So he's not one of those guys that was just running his mouth. He had video of him and his guys kicking doors in. Like, these are professional, tough guys. Okay. And so that was really interesting. So it was Dan Chappell and Adam Fox. I barely know Adam. I do not know Dan at all. But there was not 5 guys. They showed up to my house, and there's some stuff that happened. I don't know what I'm allowed to say on your podcast, but we smoked marijuana at my house. And I showed off my guns, and I showed off an RF detector, radio frequency detector. Because, of course, why wouldn't you, man? As men, we all know when we get gadgets or toys, we want to show it off to the other boys.
Yeah. Every time I knew, every time one of my wife's friends or one of my wife's husbands comes to the house with the, I'm like, here's my gun collection, and here's
Yeah, it's
that's what you do.
these are grown
Yeah,
men toys, American
yeah,
toys. You know,
exactly,
every time I get a new
exactly.
gun, I send out a text message to everyone showing them a picture of it. I'm proud of it. I want them to see it.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly, man.
yeah.
So that's all I was doing with that. And he's like, "Oh man, you got to bring that to the upcoming FTX. That's a field training exercise. Typically at these, you'll have multiple stations where you're given training. Unfortunately, the majority of these, it's always the same basic stuff. You know, weapons handling and manipulation. You got your IFAC station and typically a shoot house." I've been to enough of these, none of that stuff stands out anyways. And he's like, hey man, you got to bring that to that. Also, a militia get together. It was a national militia get together he was talking about. So what? So he wants me to bring something. You know what? I would have taken it without him asking because again, I'm going to be around a group of people from around the U.S. and I can show it. Seriously, nobody has this stuff, and it was the cheapest piece of
Right.
crap
Yeah.
off the internet, anyways. It actually doesn't really work. It's hilarious. I got it because like when you get a principal and you want them to feel comfortable, right? Comfortable and confident. So you would typically sweep a room or a vehicle before they get to it to make sure there's no bugs or anything like that. It's ridiculous. It sounds ridiculous. But anyways,
Yep.
what you would do with it is you do it in front of them as well. And so it's more of a show. It's a ploy, you know, to make them feel comfortable and confident. Reputation goes a long way in this stuff. So that's why I
Yeah.
had it anyways, just to answer that question. So he said to bring it. I was like, oh, heck yeah, that's not a problem. We hop in the truck, and he makes an offhand comment about we're going to. There's certain language that was used, and if you prefer that I curb that, I can do that.
You can say whatever you want on the show, man.
All right. He said we're going to recon the bitch's house, the tyrant bitch's house.
Okay.
And you know, I mean, you can infer whatever you want, but unless it's explicitly stated, anyways, you know, it's odd. It's like, well, I barely know you, and that's a weird thing to say. But it was funny because he made some comment about the boat too. You know, blowing up a boat. And if they get another one, we'll blow that one up too, and then you know we'll blow up.
And this was Adam Fox saying this.
This was Adam Fox saying this stuff, and so it was obviously a dark joke, right? And here we go again. When you hang out with a bunch of wannabe tough guys, you hear all sorts of craziness, all sorts of dark humor. It's not uncommon.
Yep.
And in my head, you know, again, I'm high. And he's making this joke, and I'm like, oh, it's kind of funny because in my head as he's saying it, I'm seeing those rubber stamps just come up. We came up north, and it's like an hour drive from my place. It's 100 miles away. They start talking about, you know, we need to find her address. So first of all, I'd like to point out they didn't even have an address. They drove like 3 hours, right? 3-4 hours to make all the way up to Elk Rapids. Didn't even have an address. And they're just saying her. You know, that doesn't mean Governor Whitmer. I'm not putting anything together yet. Shortly after they start talking about Governor Whitmer. And in the context of the situation, there'd be no reason to be bringing her up. You know, why would we be looking for her place? I mean, instantly scared. You know, I'm in the back of a truck. The driver is this Dan Chappell guy. I just watched videos of him kicking doors in for the military. Got Adam in front of me. And he's you know, he was doing steroids at the time. Was a bodybuilder and all that. And they can get kind of erratic. So I'm sitting in the back like, how do I make it out of this situation alive? You obviously instantly know you can't just say, hey man, you got to drop me off. Like, I ain't cool with this.
Sure.
You know, I'm thinking I'm going to die. I got to find a way to get out of the situation. So anyways, yeah, they got a hold of a guy who helped them find the address. This guy was Tex. That was his real name is Sean Fix. He's one of the few guys who took a plea deal. So he's a coward, of course. So this guy was nothing but a liar. He tried telling everybody that he was a Navy SEAL, I guess. Oh, this is another thing. I didn't know about anybody else in the group. So to me, it was 2 guys that came up, and now we're talking crazy. Didn't even have a plan, right? So they got a hold of that guy.
Okay.
They finally found her address, and we drove by a couple of times. One of the times we drove by, Adam had asked me, he's like, hey, Molitor, I need you to take a video, you know, as we go by. I'm thinking, hey, man, if I got to take a video to make home to my kids, I'm not shooting anybody. We're not actually blowing anything up. You know what I mean? Like, I'll take a video, and I'll do it again, man. So I took a video, and that's what got me the material support of a terrorist or terrorist organization. And because I had my gun on me, that was the felony firearm. It was never pulled out. Nobody was ever threatened with it, but it's attack on charge, so they can scare you more. All in all, I was looking at 22 years going to prison because I took a video and had my gun on me to make it out of this situation alive, man. Like, this is ridiculous. during this ride,
Well, are you and are you on a were you on a private property road or were you on a public road
it
just
was still
driving by the house?
public property. It was still a public road.
Okay. Yeah, so you're just driving down a road with your phone out,
His phone. It
shooting a
was actually
video,
Adam. Yeah, it was
in the
actually
back
Adam
seat of a
Fox's
car.
phone.
Oh, it
No,
wasn't even your
and
phone.
I got to speak on
Wow.
Adam for a little bit because when I talk about him, it makes it sound like I even think he's a bad person. Like, look what he did, look what he made me do. That's not the case at all. Adam grew up without a lot of friends. He was picked on a lot. He didn't have a good male role models in his life. This Dan Chappell guy made him feel special. He gave him a purpose in life, and he really catered to that mentality that Adam wanted. He was thirsty for attention, man. So the FBI gave Dan Chappell a script, and Dan Chappell fed that script to Adam and really hyped this guy up. Everybody keeps saying that Adam Fox was homeless at the time. He was living in the basement of a vacuum shack down in Grand Rapids. The reason this guy was homeless was because his dog that he had, the breed, he couldn't have in like building apartments or anything like that. And he actually, I've seen this in other reports, right? He said that he'd rather be homeless with his dog than to have a roof over his head and not have that dog. Tell me that's a bad person, man. I'll never believe it. So
Yeah. So do you have
I
contact with Adam
I have
still or
not
no?
talked to him since we've been raided. I keep meaning to write him in prison. I don't even know what to. Oh
Okay.
yeah,
Oh,
he's in
he's in
prison. There's
prison.
still 5 guys in prison. So and we need those guys out. This whole thing was set up by the FBI, and I got a couple
Okay.
of proofs. I brought only 2 things with me, which kind of sucks because we have so many proofs that they set this up. It was 100% entrapment. And what's funny about that is I
Okay.
couldn't use entrapment because the legal definition of entrapment is
Hold on, Eric.
the government
Okay.
agency or somebody working under the purview of a government agency has to get you to do something that's typically against your character. Well, Adam Fox is the one that asked me to go on a ride. So there's no entrapment. And because I took the video and nobody told me if you don't, we're going to hurt you, I couldn't use duress. So I fall into this niche crack where there was a crime,
Mm,
like a supposed crime committed, but I had no defense against this supposed crime. Like, how weird is that, right?
yeah. It's because it was,
Was
yeah, it fell within the
w-
Oh,
legalese of the
yeah.
language.
Eric, was this so is this like the incident was basically a ride by her house and that was it? Or was there other is it I know that the media made it always seem like that you guys were running training operations on how to kidnap someone, like it was like you were in a field
Right.
like practicing it. Or was it just you basically rode by the house, took a video and then the FBI had enough evidence to pull
No,
the trigger?
they probably would have said they had enough at that time, but they wanted to get as much as they could. Obviously they really wanted these convictions. It was all right before the 2020 elections. It was 100% all politically motivated. But yeah, and I'll get to the FTX and say this is what I mean about it's really hard to stay linear on this because there's so much that goes into it, man. No,
Yeah.
during the ride there was a lot more that happened. So we ended up at a Oasis Red Bull Tavern, which was in the script the FBI made up. They made sure to have cars across the road in a different parking lot to watch us. They had agents inside of the tavern to take pictures, and they were taking pictures in the big mirror so they could it was really cool how they did it, I guess, to be honest with you. It was pretty nifty.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
during the Oasis of the Tavern thing, Dan went out to his own truck, grabbed a piece of his own paper, his own writing utensil, brought it in, and told Adam to start drawing up a map of the area. So they started doing area study right in front of me. And there's pictures of Adam, drawing the map. There's no pictures of me because I did not participate. I sat there like, I don't know what to do. I just want out of here. I didn't even get to enjoy the olive burger because I was so dang nervous, but you got to act normalish, you know what I mean? So, but yeah,
Yeah.
that was really crazy. And during this time, there was a couple other things that happened. So, like I said, when I first said Governor Whitmer, my threat level was a here, man. It was all the way at the top. During the ride and everything that I
Yeah.
saw, it went down drastically by the end of the ride. Like I said, these guys drove 3 to 4 hours, didn't have a plan, didn't have an address. They, a couple of 2 times I saw Dan. You know how like when somebody looks over in your passenger seat and like somebody rolls their eyes. I don't know if you've ever experienced that personally, but you can see eyes roll from that angle.
Sure.
He did it twice. So there's no cohesion between those two.
Okay.
It does not seem like this is a legitimate thing. I mean, they drove a few hours. That's pretty hardcore, but to not have any plan, how stupid is that? So anyways, they started doing kind of an area
Right.
study map and whatnot to find avenue. I won't go into everything, obviously, but avenues of approach, escape routes, things like
Yeah.
that. And they, so yeah, that happened. And during this, Adam was like, he was talking very loudly. And again, if this was serious, you come up with a plan. Why would they get me? They don't know me at all, so that's crazy. There weren't 5 guys. He's
Yeah.
talking loudly in public like it wasn't a big deal. Dan actually had to tell him to be quiet, so that was another sign like this is not that legit. We left the tavern and they wanted to drive by the house a couple more times. Man, I didn't even want to do it one time. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, how do I let them know I'm not cool with this without seeming insane? So, or, getting hurt. So anyways, we drove by again. We ended up going to a boat launch around the lake, so across from where her place should have been. And Dan took pictures of Adam trying to scope it out from across the lake. Again, there's no pictures of me because I stayed over by the truck. It's 70 feet away from the boat launch. I wanted nothing to do with this stuff. And when Dan was asked where Molitor was at, meaning me, he said that I was at a sign behind him. So here's a professional military door kicker who allowed one of the worst terrorists you'll ever meet in your life, homegrown terrorist, to outflank him. Get out of here, dude. That never would happen. He didn't even try to box it off so that he could keep eyes on both of us then. So no, I was never by a sign over there participating. What an idiot. We ended up, leaving. At the end of the ride, the full audio with me included is 5 hours. And at the end of the ride, you can hear Adam asking me, hey, Molitor, are you in? And I'm sitting there like, I don't even really know what's going on. I'm trying to say no without saying no. So I was very non-committal.